Witchwood Hobgoblin Stout.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. First things first, again I have to say thank you very much for all the kind messages that you've been sending me, saying how glad you are that I'm back. Oh, you will soon live to regret that when I'm posting up 2 or 3 videos a week. Well, I probably won't actually, I'll probably stagger them out a little bit, but yeah, really do appreciate it. It is nice to know that all these, well, years I will say, of doing reviews is appreciated, and hopefully I've put some of you onto some decent beer and stopped you from drinking crap beer, because that is the aim of the game. Now, speaking of crap beer, well, I shouldn't really say that, because this is a tale of woe. It really is, and I've been doing a little bit of research. Well, I've not actually been doing a little bit of research, but I've just been confirming what I more or less already know about this Witchwood Brewery. Now, say what you like about the beer, when this lot first started off, they were really good, and the Hobgoblin that came out in 1983 was very, very good. And I do remember back in the early 90s actually liking Hobgoblin, and they sold it in a lot of music venues, and occasionally I would have a pint of it. I couldn't really session it. My palate wasn't really adjusted to sessioning what essentially was classed as a bitter all night, but I do recall liking it, and yes, it was full of flavour, but for me at that time it was just a little bit too rich, and I couldn't really do more than 2 pints of it. You know, I was just a crap lager drinker then, and that was my go-to beer. But it was a good beer. Then in 2002 it got taken over by a subsidiary of Marstons called Refresh UK, I think it was called. And it started going downhill from then, and you know, Marstons are a big corporation, and they, well, at the time they were a big corporation, and they owned a lot of breweries, a lot of pubs, etc. And they added Witchwood to the list. Now, the Witchwood Brewery had only been going since 1983, but they'd already proved themselves to be quite a good brewer, and that's why Marstons got their claws into them. And I suppose for every brewer who has a dream, then being taken over by a big corporation does have its bitter sweet moments. Obviously the sweet moments are the big payout you get from the big corporation when they take you over. The bitter ones is when you start having to make compromises, or even have to start making redundancies. And sadly, that's what's happened to this Witchwood Brewery, based previously up in Witney in Oxfordshire. It is no more. As of September 2023, it's gone, as the Monty Python sketch goes. And the trouble is, when that went, a lot of their heritage went with it. And I say heritage, I mean they've been going since 1983, but in that time they did build up a big following, almost a cult following. They were famous for their very intricate, detailed artwork, and sadly now this is what it's come to. It is just a patch on what it used to be. They used to have full colour labels, they used to have really good artwork, and you know, expensive artwork does cost, to not just to print but to commission as well. But they did, that's what they did. And I really liked the artwork on there. Every beer type had a different different label, which was interesting. And then they started doing this kind of thing, Marstons, as a cost-cutting exercise. And the ultimate cost-cutting exercise was closing the brewery, sadly. Now, they also closed a couple of other breweries as well. Up in Cumbria, you had the Jennings Brewery. Marstons closed that. and they've also closed the Ringwood Brewery. I've got a couple of Ringwood beers in the fridge. This was actually bought for me by a mate. I was doing some recording for a mate, and yeah, I don't know what it is, but all the people I do recording for, they don't pay me in money, they pay me in beer, which I shouldn't really complain about, because I'm still learning the art of recording, and yeah, being paid in beer is payment at least. It won't pay the bills, but it will keep me in beer. And yeah, he bought me, I did a recording the other night for my mate Brad. Brad, if you're watching, how you going, mate? And he bought me two cases of Marstons beer, and it contains some beers I haven't reviewed before, and I haven't reviewed this one before, I don't think. They used to do, I remember they used to do a stout which I reviewed very, very early on in the channel, and I'll tell you how early on it was. They had the full colour label on it, and I used to have the bottle here, and I must have got rid of it, thinking stupidly, oh, these are going to be available for years, these bottles, there's no point in keeping one, and sadly there ain't, and I got rid of all the Witchwood bottles that I had. They'll be worth something, so if you have got any Witchwood bottles with the original labels on, keep them. You know, there's a lot of Brewery almanac collectors, as they are known, and they will pay a pretty penny for it. Not anytime soon. Yes, really sad about the Witchwood Brewery, and even if you've never bought a pint of Hobgoblin, but you have bought the Lidl's own range of beer, the Hatherwood beer, then you've drank beer from that brewery, because in recent times Lidl have their own range of beers. They still got them now, called Hatherwood, which are brewed by Marstons, but they were actually brewed in the Witchwood Brewery. Don't know where they're brewing them now. I mean, Marstons have sold off quite a few of their properties, as I've said. They've just sold that one off, and I think they've also sold off the place in Bedford that they had as well, and it's been bought by Dam. Remember Dam? They do Estrella, that lot. They've bought it, so all the Spanish beer and all the Estrella beer that you see, I think, is brewed up there. However, I digress. Let's get onto this stuff. Well, it's a stout, and it's one of their core range. I've got a couple of others in there. They've got an IPA and a golden ale I've got in the fridge. I'm really not looking forward to them, because from memory, even when they were, you know, kind of independent, they didn't taste that great. Like, I remember they had that, was it Dry Neck? I tried that. That was disgusting. But I haven't tried this one before. I'm hoping it's a rebadge. What was it? Was it Black Witch or something, I think it was called? I don't think that tasted too bad, and maybe this is the same recipe, but I don't know. I mean, they've been taken over by Carlsberg now. Well, they've merged with Carlsberg, so again, more cost-cutting exercises. When you see them closing down breweries, you can bet your bottom dollar they are cost-cutting on ingredients as well. Hence the reason, you know, Hatherwood is a prime example. I always say contract brewed supermarket beer, or beer that's the supermarket's own brand, is never going to be that good. It's because the brewer has to make a profit, the supermarket has to make a profit, corners will be cut, and you, the consumer, are the ones who are going to pick it up. So there you go. Not to mention shrinkflation as well. That's another thing that's coming into the fore now as well. I was in Skunk Central around the corner, cans of Peroni. They're all 440ml now. Used to be 500. When the fuck did that start happening? So not only are they putting the price up every time there's a budget, you're getting less for your money. We're getting fucked in this country, fucked sideways by this government, and it pisses me off. But I digress. Let's get on to the next section before I spontaneously combust. Right, this is a 500ml bottle. It is Hobgoblin Stout, as it's known. It's 4.1%. Now, I think if I was a real stickler, I could do them for false advertising, because they've still got the Witchwood Brewery written on the side. The sell-by date on this is the 31st of October 2024. Technically, I suppose they could be right, because that closed in September 2023. So if it's a year, then, well, it's probably a grey area. But if they start doing these with the Witchwood Brewery on the sign, on the label, then I think they're doing a bit of false advertising. But there you go. There is no brew sheet on this. What does it say? Jet black with aromas of roasted malts and chocolate. Enjoy the earthy bitterness, balanced by hints of coffee, cocoa, and sweet treacle flavours. Sweet treacle flavours. I don't like the sound of that. Depends how sweet it is. But 4.1%. It's more or less the same ABV as Guinness. Has it got the flavour? And Guinness haven't got much flavour, believe me. But there you go. There it is in the bottle. As I say, the labels are a fucking shadow of what they used to be. Sadly, no more. That's a real shame. Let's get this open. Let's see what's going on. Apparently, I was reading up about this, back in better times, when they were based in Oxford, they sort of classified themselves as the unofficial beer of Halloween. And they didn't half sell a lot of beers. And apparently now Halloween is the second biggest type of festival where beer is consumed after New Year's Eve. Who'd have known that, eh? Right, well, it certainly looks like a stout, so it's got that going for it. The head on it is quite beige in colour. There's no nitro in this. This is a normal carbonated stout. Aroma, surprisingly for a Marston beer, Marston's beer, there is some aroma. Marston's, when I've reviewed Marston's beers in the past, 9 times out of 10 there was hardly any aroma from a beer at all, and that is always an alarm bell for me. It's not always the case where there's no flavour, where there's no aroma, but the two do go hand in hand. And just to prove my point, if you're trying to drink something that really you don't like the taste of, then you hold your nose, don't you? So aroma does have a lot to do with flavour. There's science to that. I'm not going to go into it here, but trust me, there is. And yeah, there's the usual stouty aromas. Sweet malt, sweet dark malt, very slight coffee and chocolate, but aromas are quite, I won't say quite faint, but relatively faint. And to be honest, it doesn't really smell that bad. There's no nasties in it, which is unusual for a Marston's beer, because by Christ, I have tasted and smelt some rotten tasting Marston's beer. I really don't have a good reputation. I remember Marstons Brewery, I reviewed that on the channel, didn't like that. A couple of other Marston's beers. They did one called Levy, which was really nice actually. It had all the makings of a mild. And what did they do? They discontinued it. Fucking worked that one out. But there you go. I have to say, Roma isn't big, isn't really bowling me over, but there's no nasties in it, so with a Marston's beer that is always a bonus. But the proof, as I always say, is in the tasting. So let's shut up and get this down my fat Gregory Peck. Bottoms up and your good health. Well, it's certainly not the best stout I've ever tasted. It's not going to win any prizes, put it that way. It's kind of doing what a stout should, but slightly underwhelming. Yes, there are flavours in there. There's a slight roasted malt, coffee type aroma to it, but flavour to it, not aroma. But it really isn't doing much for me at all. Well, this is slightly chilled. It's come out of the fridge, been sitting here for a while. Body's a bit watery. That's what's putting me off. I would have expected a little bit more body on this, and sadly I'm not getting it. Finish is there, but it isn't big. Slight sweetness to it as well. I'm wondering if they've put some kind of brewing sugar or invert sugar, or knowing Marstons, probably brewing syrup, that fucking great Satan of an ingredient that some people use, some unscrupulous macro brewers. Well, not unscrupulous, this is what they do. But this isn't doing much for me at all. It's not a pour down the sink job, I will say that, but there are 1,001 better stouts out there with much more flavour even I would go so far as to say the Guinness West Indies Porter, and that's come from a macro brewer. Even the Guinness Original in bottles has got more going for it than this has. It's the body that's letting it down. It's watery. Flavour is there. I'm not going to say it's completely bland and tasteless, but it just tastes a bit cheap and nasty, if you know what I mean. Now, I wouldn't compare this to the Hatherwood Porter. There's no point. I mean, I'm comparing. I won't say shit with shit. I'm comparing bland, bang average beers, and I don't do that. If I'm going to do a comparison video, I want to compare the best to the best, and this falls way below the best, sadly. I mean, they've got all the marketing still. It's got its own website, Hobgoblin, but this is just a symbol of what used to be a reasonably good brewer. And then Marstons came over and did what Marstons do, and just they either close or ruin the beer, which to me is a great shame. And I've been reading a lot lately about the state of the brewing industry, and a lot more people are giving up drinking or just simply not drinking, and obviously that has a knock-on effect on pubs. It has a knock-on effect on breweries, and it's not just the UK as well. I'm seeing it reported in Germany. Nobody can buy the Spartan Brewery, or nobody wants to buy the Spartan Brewery, I should say. That's I think it's owned by AB InBev, and they're trying to get rid of it. They're trying to downsize their German operation, so I don't know whether they're going to be selling Becks, but they're trying to offload Spartan, and there's no takers. I think beer consumption, I did read beer consumption in Germany, of all places, was on the wane, which is something I never thought I'd be saying, but I don't know, it's looking a bit grim for the old beer fan out there, which is a real shame. And I'm afraid if you're producing stuff like this, I can't see where there's a market for it. With Guinness out there, people are going to drink Guinness over that all day long compared to this stuff, and yeah, I'm completely underwhelmed, hence the reason I'm not talking about the beer much, and I've gone off topic, and that's what happens when I drink mediocre beer, unfortunately. And I have to say, this falls in the mediocre category. So what is the verdict on Hobgoblin Stout? Well, I have to say, very underwhelming. The flavours, there is flavour there. I'm not going to say it's completely bland and tasteless, but there's a weakish body to it, slightly roasted malt flavour, not much of a finish, and yeah, it's really not doing anything for me at all. There are 1,001 better stouts out there, and for me personally, I would go with Guinness all day long. Guinness Original in a bottle if I was buying bottled beer, all day long, if I wanted a session stout. Now, there are better stouts out there. If you want flavour, I would say go for the Shepherd Neame Double Stout. That is intensely flavoured stout, probably one of the best stouts for flavour I've ever tasted. However, is it the best? Well, I don't think so. I've tasted some really good stouts. Sam Smith's do a really decent stout. They do, I mean, it depends what you want to talk about when it comes to stout. Imperial stouts, well, Baltic porters, etc. No, I don't think so. But for me, if you're going to talk about sessionable stouts, then possibly the Fuller's Black Cab Stout. For me, that's a fantastic stout. And stout and porter, I think, are the same type of beer. And the ultimate for me, the ultimate stout stroke porter for me, is the Fuller's London Porter. I think it knocks spots off every other porter out there, including Guinness as well. Now, there's a lot of Irishmen would fucking pound my head in for saying that, but for purely on flavour, I would have to go with the Fuller's London Porter as being the best that I've tasted. Out of all these dark roasted malt beers, it's just got everything. It's got the balance, it's got the drinkability, it's got the body on it. It's a slightly higher ABV. I think it's 5.1 or 5.2%, but it's just a really nice porter. And as I've always said in my videos, nowadays there really isn't much difference between porter and stout. Years and years ago there would have been. Porter would have been a slightly weaker beer. Of course, stout back in them days it meant different things. If stout now means you're a little bit fat, stout back then meant strong. So hence the reason it's called stout, because it was slightly stronger than porter, or sometimes in some cases much stronger than porter. But yeah, this is leaving me underwhelming, and I keep going off topic, talking about other things, which is probably boring the shit out of you. So I'm going to give you the mark on this, and I really can't give it more than 5 out of 10. It's just underwhelming, and the fact that there's better out there is just knocks marks off of it as well. There's really no reason for me to ever buy this beer, and I didn't buy this one, and I probably wouldn't buy it if I saw it in a supermarket and there was other, stouts available. I mean, if I go down to Morrison's now, I've got the Fuller's Black Cab Stout, I have got the Guinness Original, I've got the Guinness West Indies Porter, 3 fantastic stouts. So I'm really not going to give this a second look, unfortunately. But there you go. So I think 5 out of 10 is the best I can do, and I may be being a little bit generous with that, but I'm going to leave it at 5 because it's not a chuck down the sink job, and there's no real nasty aromas, no real nasty flavours that are putting me off, which is unusual for a Marstons beer, because fuck me, they have got some fucking bad beer. But there you go. And remember, beer is working class champagne.